Hello everyone, I am back, and to give you an update on what's going on, or what's been going on. Those that have kept up know that we have been making carbon fiber doors. So the previous efforts didn't turn out so great, and I have been just adding layers of carbon fiber, and right now I've got results that I'm happy with. Obviously, the perfectionists won't be happy with them, but it's not their car. The plan now is probably, if I was going to keep the car for myself, I would leave it like this and go ahead and put a epoxy on it for, not epoxy, but 2K clear coat on it. There we go. For protection, UV protection, and of course I'm going to sand this flat. It is close to flat, but there are some areas that aren't quite flat. Those of you that have looked before saw that you could see defects in the surface from air voids. So I added a layer of carbon fiber on top, and this is the result of adding the carbon fiber on top. This one is still curing right now. This other one is cured, and it needs the final sand to completely flatten it. But you can see that, again, it looks good enough for my car. Whether it's good enough for another car's another story. The plan is sand it flat and either paint it or put a carbon fiber wrap on it to get the uniformness or whatever. But anyway, it is done. It's completely solid. It has a nice gloss mirror finish. You can see the reflection, and it does have some defects, but they are very minimal. And again, this one's just a step behind, waiting for it. It's probably, yeah, it's still tacky. All right, so since we had good success with the doors, or good enough success with the doors, we decided to go ahead and do the vents. The reason we did the vents is because the mold that I'm using has the vertical vents. The Grand Sports have horizontal vents. So what I'm going to do is cut out the vertical vents, excuse me, and bond this in from the back side. So we left enough extra carbon fiber to make a flange. So we'll cut it roughly 1 inch on the outside border all the way around, and then we will use some panel bond to glue this in from the back side. This currently has 2 layers. So through just feeling, 2 layers is enough for something that isn't going to have someone leaning against it. It's strong enough to hold its own shape, and is honestly as strong as it needs to be. So we're only making this 2 layers thick. The doors are 4 layers thick, and the reason why is at 3 layers, which is what it was functional, but you could push on the door and it would flex. Not a lot, but if somebody was to lean against the door, it would flex. Now with 4 layers, it's pretty stiff. It'll still flex, but by the time we attach it in place, it should be sufficiently stiff enough to give you the feeling that it is strong. It's still lightweight, even with 4 layers of carbon fiber, 5.5 ounce carbon fiber. This thing weighs 5 pounds. So it weighs a fraction of what it would weigh if it was fiberglass. All right, so since that worked out well and the vents worked out well, hey, if you're gonna go big. So I decided to go ahead and do the front end in carbon fiber. So if we come back here, you can see that this is the Grand Sport front end. It is not going to fit exactly on the car. It's going to require some modifications, but it is a good start. So what I was going to have to do is I already modified the fender flares, and it took some hacking and piecing together to get it together. So I said, well, I need some pieces of fender flares, and the part that I made for that side, this side, is the one where it did a pre-release, and then I tried to fix it, and some of the resin got underneath. And anyway, it came out okay, but it was going to take a pretty significant amount of body work. So I had two options. One, go remake this in the mold, and I have the mold up in the rafters up there. So I started to do that, and then I said, wait a minute, without vacuum, there's a chance of getting voids. And neither one is exactly what I need. Neither the C6 to C2 molds, which are up there, nor the actual C2 Grand Sport parts are right. And so since we had the best luck with basically skinning a part and then taking that off, that will work. The disadvantage of this, if I was trying to make an exact copy of a car, is it's going to be off by the thickness of the material. So in other words, the inside of this part is going to be exactly the outside of the actual part, which you can see. But since I am not trying to fit this on a actual C2, it doesn't matter. I'm going to have to modify it anyway. And so what we found out is that we could get a better looking part without vacuum by doing it this way. All right, so what we did was I used PVA, put PVA on the surface so that this would not stick to the original part. Then we used a chip brush and epoxy, put a layer of wet epoxy on it, and then we laid the carbon fiber on top of that, worked out all the air bubbles, got the pattern as straight as we could. It's not perfect, but again, we decided we're going to do 4 layers of carbon fiber, just like we did on the doors. I think it's overkill, but my helper said they'd rather do 4 layers. I don't care. I mean, no matter what, it's half the weight of fiberglass, so that's fine. There's the extra carbon fiber. We went ahead and cut all the carbon fiber pieces ahead of time. And so this is what we got. And this was a learning experience to see what do we do, what don't we do. Let's try it first and see what works and what doesn't work, which we found out a lot of stuff that didn't work. So we put it down and then tried to correct it because it wasn't exactly straight lined up. And you can see what happened is, oh, I needed to pull this down here because it wasn't quite enough. Well, when I did, oops, it spread the toe apart here. Same thing here. Every place we tried to correct by tugging on the carbon fiber to straighten out the weave, it caused as much of an issue as it fixed. Not quite, because some of these, there were ripples in it. In other words, there were high spots because there was extra material here from the curve and making the transition. And so the options were, one, cut a whole bunch of reliefs. And when we did that, in fact, we did it right here because it stuck up, an inch or so. So what we did was we cut a slice here, put this piece down flat, and then overlapped this, and then got it as flat as we could. So the U Perfectionist, it's twice as thick through about an inch section right here. I don't care. You might care, but I don't care. All right, so we could not get it to bend around this edge right here. If we got it to bend right here, it lifted on this surface. So the decision was made, screw it. We're not gonna worry about this. I already have this lip made out of fiberglass, and honestly, one piece of mounting out of fiberglass isn't gonna make any difference. So what I plan to do is take the fiberglass piece, cut it, and leave about an inch here, and then we'll bond it to the back side, and use this as the mounting. This is not the correct mounting for the C6. This is the correct mounting for a C2. So it's insignificant whether we keep it or lose it. Same way with this depression right here. I did it just to see how hard it is to get the carbon fiber to make a transition or shape like this. It is difficult. You can see that I've got a void right there in the carbon fiber. But remember, there is going to be 3 more layers, so between the 3 layers, chances are that void spot will not show on the final part. It is key to not have a whole lot of excess material on the edge. I aimed for roughly 1/2 inch. In some cases it was 1 inch because we were cutting it while it was wet. We decided that before we proceed, we're going to make a pattern. As it was, we put the whole flat sheet, measure how much we needed, put the whole flat sheet on there, and then only put epoxy where it needed to be, and said, okay, well, we'll just cut it after the fact. Well, in hindsight, that was not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to make a pattern, go ahead and leave yourself some excess material at the edges so that it doesn't have to be exactly placed. So let's say 1 inch or 2 all the way around the border, and then do that instead of like we did. You can see all the scraps that we had to cut off. So that's wasted material, but I don't care about that. But it did make it harder to get it to lay down flat. The other thing is we ran the same problem with this that we did with the other pieces, in that we left it wet this time. We didn't wait for it to get tacky. We left it wet. We put it down in place, but when we put it down, it was virtually impossible to get it exactly straight with the fiber orientation. So then we tried to fix it, and like I said, when we tried to fix it, we ended up with issues like this right here. That's probably the worst of it. So a better way to do this, for those of you doing it, is pick a spot. So in this case, I would pick this ridge right here, going all the way down, and this part right here. So this band that goes from thin to thick and then back to thin here, okay? I would only put epoxy on this area right here. This is what we're going to do for the next layer. Only going to put epoxy in this section right here. Then we're going to take the carbon fiber, set it on top of here, and get this straight. So this is relatively easy to get straight because it's such a small area. The hard part of getting it straight the other way was, as soon as this side touches, it wants to stay. So if I need to move it over a little bit, I've got to get the fiber to come up and over and around this corner. It does not want to come up around this corner. I have to pull hard enough, and then like in this case, you can see I pulled it this direction. What happened is, up until here, it went over that direction just fine. From here it said, no, I want to stay where I'm at. Same thing if I pulled it down here, that part stayed where it wanted to or where it was, and then this part said, okay, fine, I'll slide. But then it left the gap right there. So what I learned is, go ahead and pick a small enough area that you can use we use Bondo squeegees here, that you can put it down between the chip brush, putting down the epoxy, and the spreaders or squeegees. There we are. Sorry, it's been a long day. You can get all of this to have the uniform pattern and have straight lines. Let's see how. All right, so if you look at this, it's not bad, but if you look right there, there's a bit of an S. I'm not sure if it shows up in the camera, but in person you can see that it starts here, it goes down a little bit and then goes back up. So it's kind of S for the fibers in the carbon fiber, and obviously it would be nice if that was absolutely arrow straight. So by doing it the new way of just concentrating on one small area, then the hope is that it can be at least straight right through here. It won't matter if it has a curve right here because the body panel curves. So I think when people look at it, if this area right here is straight, but this area curves to match the body lines, I think it will be fine. Same thing here. If, as long as it starts out straight where this line is, or not even straight, if it follows this line, body line, if the pattern in the material follows that, then that's fine because it's going to deviate because obviously it's more distance from this edge to that edge and that edge to that edge, and especially as it narrows. Anyway, that's just to say that if that's going to be the easiest way. The other thing was areas like this, where the material obviously came straight across here. We needed to go ahead and get it to go into this little pocket right here. So what I did was I cut a 45-degree angle, folded this down, folded this in, and there's an overlap right here. So you can see that it comes around, and everywhere there is excess material, I had to decide where am I going to have the overlap, and most importantly, where am I going to hide the seam? The seam is going to be there, so where can we hide it as best as possible? Now there is an aluminum plate I have to make to come across here and cover this up. So this is all going to be behind that aluminum plate. So this seam right here won't even be seen. Even if it is seen, it's really not that bad. I mean, you can see it right now because I'm focusing on it, and it's not smoothed out. I could come in here with a sander and smooth that out. Same thing right here, that I decided, well, this is going to be behind the headlight, so that doesn't matter. What matters is that it looked good from over here. So what I did was came in here, sliced it to relieve it, took this and tucked this underneath. From the front, it's tucked underneath. From the top, it's on top. It overlaps right here, and then there's the actual edge of this piece. I could have cut it better, but again, because it's going to be hidden by headlight, didn't really care. These areas in here weren't as bad as I thought they would be. As we were working, the epoxy was, of course, hardening, curing, and it got tacky as we were working. So what I was able to do was, again, I already had put down the epoxy on the surface, so it was getting tacky. So by the time I got to here, the carbon fiber was acting almost like a pre-preg carbon fiber, where it was formable, I'll call it semi-stiff, semi-rigid, semi-flexible, whatever, but I could actually take my finger and poke it into areas that it needed to go into. So I'm really happy with the way this curve came out. I was worried about that. One of the other things is the fiberglass one I made. It was really difficult to get the fender lip to come out correct. So I was very careful about that. Again, the amount of excess material gets kind of critical. So I actually cut it a little bit too much, you can see. But the idea was to only have the minimal amount of material here to make this fender lip. This fender lip, the width of it is not critical because you can't see it, but you can see that like right there, it didn't want to stay in place. You could put something there to make that, hold that up better. I did use these little clips right here. Let me grab one. And all I did was came in the inside of the lip and put it like here. So I'm going to actually fix this. I'm off camera. All right, so I went ahead and put another clip right there to keep that from sagging. It's sagging a little bit there. Okay. A better way to do this would be to get a strip of very thin wood, cover it with plastic, and then use the clamps to hold it. That would keep it from sagging in between where the clamps are. Gravity is not your friend here. Another option at this point would be to flip the whole thing upside down, and then gravity would help. I could push it down and gravity would keep it in place. The problem with that is I would risk messing up the top surface, and so it's not worth messing up the top surface to get a surface that's not really going to show to look better. Okay, We were going to put all 3 layers, there are going to be 4 layers total, so we're going to put the other 3 layers on top of it right now. And after we had the challenges that we had, I decided, no, let's go ahead, leave this alone, let it cure overnight at least, if not a day. It says it takes 24 hours, and overnight obviously is short of that. And then figure out what to do to make this as good as possible, because whatever the layer underneath is, you can't get the layer on top any better than the layer underneath. So the idea to me is let's fix this as good as we can and then move on from there. The vents. All right, so there is the area that the vents are. I could have made those vents work, but we already decided that we're going to use those other vents. So it made sense to, all it needs is a flat area right there, and I can cut that out and again, glue those or bond those vents on the inside. All right, screwed up here. Did not, we measured it, made sure it was wide enough. In fact, we cut all that material out. It's sitting over there. Should have pulled the carbon fiber down further. Didn't, and it was a choice between leaving it or trying to fix it. And after all the issues of pulling on it and causing the gaps, I decided, you know what, we'll just patch that in, because that, you'd have to get on your hands and knees to see that patch that we're going to have to do, because there's a step right there. Secondly, I'm not sure that that part's even needed, because that step is on the C2 Corvettes, not on the C6. So I have a strange feeling that the actual piece is going to go straight down from right there. I won't know until I actually look at it, and it's late and dark and all that, so not going to worry about it, but that's something to look at. So next time, again, by using the pattern, we won't have that issue. We'll make sure we get it centered. Speaking of the pattern, that's the other thing is, when I go to put the pattern on, I'm going to draw a line. Well, I actually don't even need to draw a line. We can use this as the reference point of where to line it up. So I just came up with this idea as I'm speaking right now. That's the advantage of rambling like I do. So what we'll do is we will make a pattern, and then we will lay the pattern on top of the car. And then we will draw a line on the pattern where this line is. All right, so then we will transfer that line from the pattern onto the piece of carbon fiber. When we lay the carbon fiber, we will ensure that the line that we've drawn on the carbon fiber lines up with this line right here. Once we do that, we know that the pattern of the carbon fiber will follow the curve of the body panel, and so we will get rid of the issue with the S that we were talking about. So between having a reference line to line everything up and only doing this section and making sure this section is right, the rest of it should take care of itself. So what we'll do is start from this. This is our alignment point. So start from the alignment point, work our way over here, because this area has epoxy on it. Then once we get all of this essentially perfect, then fold back the carbon fiber, put epoxy on here, fold it back over, and use the squeegees to work out any air pockets. I think that's going to be the approach that's going to work. My helper was confused, saying, why do you care? This is 3 layers down, 4 layers by the time you're finished. And I said, what you don't understand is we have 3 times to practice what's the best way to lay down carbon fiber without vacuum. And the 4th layer, hopefully, we figured out between the 3 which was the best way to do it. So I am treating each layer as if it's the final layer. And then I will learn how I get 3 practices on how to best lay the carbon fiber. Again, if this turns out perfect, awesome. I don't expect it to turn out perfect. I just expect it to turn out good enough for me. So good enough for me is probably not good enough for a customer that is paying good money for these cars. So what I'm going to do is either paint it or wrap it. Someone said Hydro Dip, but I haven't done that, and I have no desire to go through that learning curve right now. So again, painting or wrapping, and I may try to wrap it myself. I may pay someone to wrap it. Wrapping's, those of you that kept up with it, it's not cheap. So I'll decide what to do when I get to that point. Painting, I'm not allowed to paint. It's in my lease that I'm not allowed to paint in this facility. So if I have it painted, I'm going to have to send it out and have it painted. Regardless, if I have it painted, I'm going to do all the body work myself as much as possible and then leave only the final painting to the shop. The shop that I talked to, their labor rate, I think he said was $150 an hour. So I can either pay their guys $150 an hour or pay them $150 an hour for their guys' work, or I can do it myself and save that $150 an hour, which of course I would rather do. So even though this is our first attempt at making a big, complicated, curved carbon fiber piece, I'm tickled with the results. It's not perfect, but I did not expect perfection. I would be absolutely happy, tickled pink, if just to use this as it is, even though it does have the defects that I've shown you and the minor issues. I do expect by the time we get to the fourth layer, it'll be even better than this. All right, so that's all I've got, but I wanted to show you all of that. There is one other thing. I have the fenders, the big bulbous fenders for the Delahaye. All right, they are very thick and very heavy, and they were expensive to have made. What I decided to do is have a skin put on it just so I can get the basic shape. And my plan is to use this to figure out where everything is. And you can see we've already damaged it trying to get it off. Purposely made it mold bound rather than putting seams in it or whatever. So what happens is as you start trying to get it out, it starts tearing. I only made it a single layer of fiberglass mat. So what happens is that's thin enough that it will tear if it is under extreme force, which it is when you're trying to get it loose. I did use PVA, and those that brag about PVA being water soluble, all right, so what that means in real life is eventually water will dissolve it, but is not immediate. It takes quite a while for water to dissolve it. So we were actually working with this. We've been working with it for a couple hours, honestly. So what we did was we got it separated enough so that we could put, you can see the funnel. So then we started funneling water in there. The longer the water sits, of course, the more it softens the PVA. But you can see that as soon as the PVA dries, it goes right back to being solid. The green PVA that I have been using literally would just peel off. For some reason, this stuff is not just peeling off. Not a big deal. All I care about is the general shape of this, which I have. Even if we virtually destroy it, I can figure out where the seams are. I can tape them, put another layer of fiberglass on it, and recreate it. The reason I'm doing this is I know I'm going to have to modify these. The final intent of these is to put them on the C8 Corvette, which of course they're not going to fit just by sticking them up the C8. So I've got to cut them to modify. And I did not want to cut my expensive and heavy fenders. So I'm going to cut these shells. After I've cut the shells, then what I can do is put the shell back on and then trace the line where I had to cut the shell. And then I'll know exactly where to cut this fender. So my expensive fender, I will only have to cut once. I can cut the shell a bunch of times. Even if I screw up cutting up the shell, I can always put it back on the piece and recreate whatever I cut that I shouldn't have cut. So that's one of the fenders, and then there's the other one. So right now, if you come look, I separated it where I could, so you can see right here, it's separated, and this is still wet. Same thing here. And then we put the funnel in here and put water in here. It's hard to see now because it's right at that edge, but below this line is water. So there's water in here working its way. You can see it's right to there. See the color difference? So it's right to there. So hopefully by leaving this overnight, in the morning when I come in, this line will be all the way down to the bottom. If it's not, I've been using these door wedges, door shims. And so if I stick this in here, you can see it will, it's hard to make it make that step because of the step. And it's also hard, there we go, to do with one hand. All right, so either that or it broke. Okay, well, anyway, if I work this down, I can tap it with a hammer. There it goes. So as I push this down, you can watch that line right there. You can see it. Let me get a hammer just to show you. And this, I do not recommend doing this way. Every time I do it, I try a different way, and I've not found a great way to do it. All right, so if I tap, you can watch that line. Let me get my camera aimed correctly. Where are we at? Oh, there we are. Okay, so you can see that line where it's purple. We use the one step and a paintbrush to put it on there, and so it's purple instead of green. But as you watch, you see that goes down. And then you hear it pop as it releases. So I'm having to tap on this a little bit. It's not real hard. I'm gonna have to tap on it a little bit. Hopefully, again, in the morning, it will have soaked down, and there we go. So that's going to help the water go down. But you can see that there's the line all the way across there. The other thing is we use scraps to make this, and where the scraps overlapped, a lot of times that's where it tore. So you can see here, and it makes sense. By putting these wedges in here, I'm trying to convince the fiberglass that it needs to be expanded by the thickness of these wedges, which of course it doesn't want to do. So what happens is it tears. So it tore all across this front edge. Again, I can fix that once we get it off of here. Of course, the solution would have been to make this in multiple pieces. So it's a trade-off. Do you want to spend time getting parts apart, or do you want to spend time making multiple pieces? I chose the former instead of the latter. Again, not sure that was the best choice, but that's a choice you'll have to make whenever you do that. Okay, that's the other thing. So that took a lot of time to do that. I am working on the fender flare out there. Let me see if we can see what it looks like. I got in trouble for having the car parked here. I assumed that because there's a fire lane right here that I could leave the car parked here. My landlord came by and said, no, that's not okay. So I have to move the cars into my designated parking spot. So here's the fender flare with the spoiler on the bottom. That spoiler is going to be carbon fiber. So you can see I remade this section. This is what I was talking about. There's going to take some body work to fix. It wouldn't take a lot of body work, but I said, you know what? I can choose between zero body work and a little body work, and I choose zero body work. And again, it's a chance to make it out of carbon fiber. This is the reshaped fender flare. The issue is that, and it's not really an issue, it's my personal preference. The actual fender flares for the Grand Sports comes out and it gets wider here. So the gap here is little, you can see where the edge of the fender opening. I don't want that 4-inch space right there, whatever that is, 5 inches right there, and then only a little bit here. And then the same thing in the front. It has a wide gap. It had like a 4-inch gap in the front. I didn't want that. So what I did was I sectioned this, tilted it a little bit. I'm going to work on this edge, and I'm going to make it even spacing all the way around except for right here. And the reason I'm not doing it right here is I want it to look like the car's been lowered. So what I can do is I can lower the fender lip and make it look like the car's lowered. Instead of making it the same space all the way around here, then I would have to lower the car to get the look that I want. So by going ahead and cheating and making this curve a little flatter on the top, it's going to look like the car's lowered without it actually being lowered. Then I can either raise it or lower it as I decide what to do. The other thing is I had to fill the gap right here. I had previously asked whether I should bring the body out to cover the front of the tire, or do like, which is what it is on the C6, or have it come in like it did on the Grand Sport and have that part of the tire exposed. So I chose the latter option. So this is just a foam board that I got from a hobby store, dollar store, whatever. And so I took it in here, cut it to shape, got the curve that I wanted, and then duct taped it in place. You can see duct tape doesn't stick real well. So my idea is now I'm going to go ahead and cover this, make this piece out of carbon fiber, and then attach it to that other. Same thing with the front spoiler. It's going to be carbon fiber, and it's going to attach to the front nose here. And then we come over here and we can see what it looked like before I did anything to it. So you can see what I'm talking about. It's a little dark, maybe you can't see. I don't think you can. But anyway, here's the gap right here. You can see I can stick my whole hand in that gap right there. I don't like that gap. And you can see where the C6 inner fender liner is actually not quite halfway, but at least a third of the way in from there. But it does, like I was talking about, it's got a gap right there, and it comes up here and it gets significantly narrower to where there is no gap right here, and then it gets wider again. And again, you can see that the C2 has that whole hand width gap right there, and the C6 pretty much split it in the front. So this is what it would have looked like if I had gone with the C6. I would have had that piece come out and cover more of the tire instead of going ahead and following the body curve and exposing more of the tire. Again, just a simple design decision that I decided to make. The mirrors I've got mostly off. There's one stupid wire. Let me go to the other side because there's light over here. One stupid wire holding the mirrors on. The mirrors have to come off to put the carbon fiber skin on. This door panel has to be cut off and replaced with the carbon fiber one that I made. And so the mirrors have to come off. This wire right here, the wire bundle, actually is disconnected. But this one wire is the XM wire. You have to pull off the footwell panels to get to it. I don't want to do that. I did find out that there is a connector on the inside of here. So what I'm going to do is cut this open, disconnect it, and that way the mirror will come off. I'm going to replace those mirrors with something of a different design. I don't like the design of those mirrors. I don't think it complements either the C6 or the Grand Sport I'm going to make. So I'm going to do something in between. Finally, there is the vertical vents I was telling you about. Again, the light's not good. I'll have to redo this in the daytime. But anyway, if you could see it, there are vertical vents right there. We're changing to the horizontal vents. So this whole area, vent area, is going to be cut out. And then we're going to glue that, the horizontal vents in from the back side. All right, the other thing is, I moved this out for wider tires, the fender flare. You can see that even after I did it, there is, what is that, a ½ inch gap? So what I did was I screwed it in there and purposely left that ½ inch gap there because that's where I wanted it. And then I cut out these sections and put them there, and then I used the aluminum tape underneath to tape these in place. So my plan was to lay the carbon fiber on top of this and either snake it behind here, put a slot in there and snake it behind there, or just go ahead and let it overlap all of this. Cover this with carbon fiber and then come back in and cut away this part that's stuck up. Patch it up, because again, I was putting multiple layers on here. So the first layer, second layer, it won't matter if I cut it and sliced it and spliced in pieces, as long as it's covered by at least one layer after that. Finally, I was going to make this whole thing out of carbon fiber and then stick it onto this fiberglass. That's before I decided, hey, let's go ahead and go for it and try to make the front end, the whole front end out of carbon fiber. So what I was going to do was exactly where the tape is. Everything that's on this white piece, I was going to make in carbon fiber, and then I was going to bond it to what's underneath. Instead, now I'm going to make the whole thing out of carbon fiber. So what that means is this edge right here, it was a little oversized so that when I bond it, then I could trim it. Now that I'm going to do it the other way, I need to not have this go up quite so high like it does now. It's barely anything, but I would come in here with a sander and make it follow this curve instead of having that step. The other issue is there's steps all over this thing. So by remaking the whole thing in carbon fiber, I don't have to deal with all those steps. I would either have to use body filler or something to blend all of this in. Remaking the whole part means I don't have to do that. I can actually literally set the carbon fiber piece on top of here and then let it fall wherever it falls back there, and all of this in between is taken care of because it follows the exact curve of the C2 fender. All right, kind of a long explanation, but these are the kind of decisions when you decide that you're starting with one kind of car, you're going to make it into the other kind of car, and obviously none of it is going to fit correctly. The question came up about making, well, since you're doing the front end and the doors, I'm honestly going to do the hood too in carbon fiber. What about the back section? And we have pretty much decided, you know what? We just need to get this car done. So we will probably leave the back section fiberglass since it is finished. I don't know. I was outvoted on it. I wanted to go ahead and do it in carbon fiber, but everybody else is going, look, we just want to get this stupid car finished. Anyway, the other thing is the split window is already made as well, and it's out of fiberglass. So this thing is going to be a mixture of fiberglass and carbon fiber. If I was to start it all over, I would do it all in carbon fiber, but again, I'm not going to remake everything. Finally, the hood support. There is no good hood support. The one on the C6, of course, fits the car and the engine, but does not even come close to allowing the Grand Sport vented hood to work. The C6 to C2 takes care of part of that, but it still doesn't allow the vented hood to work. So what I've decided is, and I was hoping that, well, maybe I can use the support. This is just the back support for the Grand Sport hood. And I said, maybe I can just use the back support for the Grand Sport hood. Well, that won't work either because it won't lay flat enough here. It's, first off, the corners have to be cut off. So anyway, the bottom line is, out of the 3 different hoods and hood supports I have, none of them are going to work straight out of the box. So I'm going to have to modify them. What I'm thinking is I will probably section a little bit out of these back vents, like cut maybe 2 inches or so. That'll move this back edge forward. You can see that the C2 hood's a little bit too long, and it wouldn't be an issue if it weren't for the windshield wipers. But if you put this down, it'll fit, but then there's not a gap for the windshield wipers to come up through. So I've got to make a gap. You can see how close this back edge of the vent is to where I would have to cut. I don't want zero space right there. I want, an inch or 2 at least. So what I'm probably going to do is cut the inch or 2 out of here, move all of this forward that inch or 2, and that'll give me the gap to allow the windshield wipers to work. So again, all of these are just little stuff that you have to do when you're designing and building your own car. All right, so like, subscribe, hit the alert, hit the thanks if you want to donate. And if you don't like what I'm doing, you don't know jack. Bye.